Chapter 5. "Come on, Raven," I shout, to be heard over the wind, and the sound of her hooves on the ground as we race across an open field, toward a cluster of trees in the distance. I glance back, and I can both see and hear the old Chevy truck bouncing and careening through the grass behind me. Everything had been fine up until a few minutes ago, when the truck had pulled out into the road in front of me, and the driver and passenger had jumped out, guns in hand. I immediately wheeled Raven around, and we galloped away. But they were instantly on our tail. If we can just make it to the trees. When we were about 50 yards from the woods, a second old truck, rusting and filthy, comes bursting through a line of wild shrubs, cutting us off from our escape route. "Shit," I say out loud, and pull hard on the reins, bringing Raven to a stop. I jump down from the saddle, pull the pistol from my belt, and aim at the first truck as it comes to a stop a few dozen yards away. The second truck stops behind me, and I turn to look at it before flipping my attention back to the other one. 4 men emerge, 2 from each vehicle, each of them armed with long guns. The one who had been driving, a tall, mean-looking man with a dark beard and hair, moves to the front of the Chevy and looks at me. He smiles, but the expression is more disconcerting than comforting. Like his companions, he's dressed in blue jeans, a flannel shirt, and some sort of hat. The passenger stays behind the open door of the truck, his rifle resting on the window frame. "Hello, friend," the driver says, gesturing with his hand. "I'm not your friend," I reply, peering at him over the sights of my pistol. "I suppose not," he says. "But it seems like you missed the toll booth." "There was no toll booth," I say. "Well, not as such, but if you use our road, you need to pay the toll." I glance quickly at the 2 men standing near the second truck, and then back at the other man. "You own this road, huh?" I ask. "We do," he says. "I didn't think anyone owned the roads." He shakes his head and smiles at me again. "Maybe not before, but it belongs to us now." I nod and tilt my head to the side slightly. "What's the toll?" I ask. He looks at me for a few minutes, and then I see his eyes move to Raven. "I suppose the horse and all your supplies might do." "That's not going to happen," I say, tightening my grip on the pistol. He smiles at me again, and I get a little chill that travels down my spine. "Well," he says, slowly shaking his head, "I guess we'll see about that." He gestures to his companions behind me, and they all begin advancing. I start to squeeze the trigger when the side window of the truck in front of me suddenly explodes, and then the sound of a rifle shot echoes across the field. All 4 of the men duck, their heads flicking from side to side, searching for the shooter. I grab Raven's reins to keep her from bolting and crouch in the grass. A second shot strikes the other truck, busting out the windshield, and the 2 men who arrived in it take off running into the woods. I raise my pistol and point it at the man who had been talking to me. "I would go if I were you," I say, gesturing toward the road behind us. They start to climb into the truck, but I shake my head. "No," I say. "Leave the truck and the guns." For a second, the man stands and stares at me, a scowl on his face. And then he and his companion turn and flee down the highway after dropping their weapons on the ground. I stand in the field by myself for a few seconds, wondering if the shooter is saving me, or if this is some sort of out of the frying pan but into the fire kind of situation. Finally, a figure appears in the distance as he emerges from the trees on the far side of the highway, a horse following close behind him. "George?" I ask as he draws closer. He smiles at me and slings a hunting rifle over his shoulder. "What the hell are you doing here?" I ask. "I changed my mind." "Changed your mind?"
"About coming with you," he says. "And I guess it's a good thing I did."
"I had it handled."
"Did you?"
he asks, grinning at me. "Well, almost," I say.
"That's better," he says. "Are you okay?"
"Yes, I'm fine, thanks to you."
"I only did what needed doing."
"How did you find me?"
"It wasn't that hard,"
he says, walking over and stroking Raven along her side.
"I just followed the road. I figured you were going to stay on it as far as you could."
"Well, I'm glad you did."
"Me too." "You know they were going to kill you, right?"
I nod and sigh. "I know."
"Or maybe worse."
"I know."
"Then why didn't you kill them?"
he asks, frowning at me. "It was in my head. I just couldn't make my hands do it." "Why didn't you kill them?"
"I'll only kill someone if I have no other choice. I took a chance that they were cowards, and I was right."
"And if they weren't?"
"Then things would have turned out differently for them."
"We should get out of here," I say, "before they come back."
"Good idea,"
George says, before pulling a large hunting knife out of a sheath on his belt. He walks over to the truck and punctures all 4 tires, and then strides to the other vehicle and does the same. While he walks back over to me, he picks up the guns on the ground, ejects the rounds, and then collects them and puts them into his pocket. He takes the 2 rifles and wedges the barrels down between the bodywork and front bumper of the truck and gives each of them a good shove, bending them.
"I just want to make sure they can't come after us,"
he says. "That's a good idea."
"You ready?"
"I'm ready," I say, as I put my foot into the stirrup and boost myself up into the saddle. "What changed your mind?"
"Angela,"
he says, as we're riding slowly down the road, with the increasing number of smoke spires drawing slowly closer to our left. "What do you mean?"
"It's like I told you. She always said you could never help someone too much, and she would have wanted me to help you as much as I could."
"What about you being too old?"
"Well, ain't nothing gonna change that, staying at home or being on the road, so I might as well make the last part of my life mean something. I could just sit at home and wait for the end or fight for something."
"Against the dying of the light?"
"Exactly."
After about half an hour, we stop and sit atop our horses and study the city of Bowling Green from a small rise that affords us a good view. "That looks bad," I say. George nods and then grunts.
"It didn't take long for things to fall apart,"
he says, a sad tone to his voice. "It seems like they were just waiting for an excuse."
"Just like the men who attacked you. Without any law enforcement, their worst traits come to the surface."
"I would have thought things would have been a bit slower before they went to hell," I say, shifting my view to a new smoke column that just appeared somewhere deeper into the city. "It's all gonna burn down, isn't it?" George shrugs and then pulls Thorne's reins, turning him to the right and staring back down the hill.
"I wouldn't be surprised,"
he says. I wheel Raven around, and we follow him. When we reach the road again, George pauses and studies the highway in both directions before prodding Thorne forward, across the shoulder, and back onto the pavement. We ride for a while in silence, and then he looks over at me.
"I think we need to avoid all the cities that we can,"
he says.
They're all going to be chaos, just like here.
That seems like a good idea.
I think we're well supplied, so there's no reason to risk it.
I'm with you.
I also think we should cut across the country as much as we can. Less chance of running into someone.
Yeah, I say, my brow deeply furrowed. He frowns at me and pulls Thorn to a stop.
What's the matter?
He asks. Nothing, I reply quickly.
Let's try that again, he says. What's the matter?
I shouldn't have needed you to save me, I say, not making eye contact with him.
Why do you say that?
I need to fight my own battles. If you weren't here, I probably would be dead already. He nods slowly and leans forward slightly in his saddle.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
How many people have you killed?
What?
You heard me. How many people have you killed?
That's a stupid question, I reply, suddenly feeling angry at him.
Why is it a stupid question?
I'm 17 years old.
And
what?
You can kill someone in a lot of ways,
he says.
You could be a soldier. You could hit them with your car. You could be a murderer.
What are you talking about? You think I'm a school shooter or something?
No,
he says, his expression still flat and impossible to read. Then what do you mean?
I've killed a lot of people in my life,
he says. His eyes locked with mine now.
Desert Storm and other places.
I thought you were a doctor.
I was. It was complicated. I was a soldier, special forces to be precise.
That's not the same thing, I say. You were following orders, you know. It was war.
Doesn't matter,
he says.
Killing someone in war isn't different from killing them in civilian life. It changes you, Lydia. After it happens, you're never the same person you used to be. I don't want that for you. So feel good that you didn't have to kill those guys.
That's why you chased them off?
Yes. I'm trying to make up for the bad things I've done in my life.
But what if it's a choice between them killing you or you killing them?
Then you take them down and you make sure they stay that way,
he says, a stern expression on his face. I just nod in response, and we turn our attention back to the road again. A few minutes later, I look over at him. Thanks for saving me, I say.
Anytime,
he replies with a warm smile. Chapter 6.
I think we should find another way,
George says, as we're standing just inside a line of trees, studying the intersection of 622 and 9007. We can see a Dollar General with thick black smoke pouring out of the roof, while people are running in and out of the store, carrying bags and boxes of items. There's at least one dead body in the parking lot. The people are passing as if it's not even there. A dozen cars and trucks are sitting in the lot, and most of their hoods are up. Some are in parking spots, while others are in the midst of turning off or onto the highway. The road is packed with cars and trucks, all of them seemingly frozen in time, with no sign of the drivers or passengers. They'll attack us, I say. And George nods.
I think so.
I look to the right, my eyes following the tree line as far as I can see. Maybe we just stick to the trees, I say. We could follow them as far as we can.
We're going to have to cross the highway at some point.
Yeah, but any place would probably be better than here. George smiles at me.
Good girl,
he says. Was this a test or something?
Maybe,
he says, grinning at me, before turning and walking to where the horses are standing a few yards back into the trees. We mount up again and start heading roughly east through the woods, always keeping the tree line in sight. About an hour later, we pause again, watching the highway while in the saddle. I study the cars and trucks sitting abandoned on the road, searching for any sign of people, but there doesn't seem to be anyone around. It looks clear, I say, and George lowers his binoculars.
Yeah, we go straight across and into the trees on the other side. Don't stop for anyone or anything, understand?
I understand. He nods, but I can tell that he's not 100% convinced by my answer. I said I understand, I say.
Good,
he says. And then he prods Thorn forward, and we trot toward the roadway. I keep scanning the area, swiveling my head left and right as the hooves of the horses clop onto the hard pavement of the highway. There are 4 cars and 2 trucks within a few yards, all of them sitting silent and still. When we're about halfway across, the door of a small sedan in front of us opens, and a young woman emerges. She's holding an infant in her arms, and it looks like she's been crying. "Can you help me?" she asks. I bring Raven to a stop, and George looks over at me.
Keep moving,
he says, his eyes darting around the area. "But, please," the woman says. "We've been stuck here since our car quit. I've been waiting for help to come." I look at George and he shakes his head and sighs.
There's not going to be any help coming,
he says. "What? What do you mean?"
We don't have time for this,
George says, talking to me this time. I frown at him and pull a water bottle out of my pack and hand it to her, along with a little container of dried fruit. "Take this," I say.
Lydia?
George says, looking at me impatiently. "You need to get somewhere safe," I say. "I know there's a Dollar General down the road, that way," she says, pointing in the direction of the store. "What about there?" "I wouldn't go there," I say. "Can you take us someplace safe?" she asks.
"No, we can't,"
George says, answering before I have a chance.
"I'm sorry, but we can't."
He reaches over, takes hold of my reins, and starts leading us away. "I'm sorry," I say as George directs us. He keeps a hold of the reins until we reach the other side of the highway. As soon as he releases them, I turn Raven slightly to put some distance between us. We cross the shoulder and then up a small rise and into the trees. George doesn't say a word for the next 20 minutes. "Are you not going to talk now?" I ask. He stops suddenly, pulling on his reins and expertly turning Thorn in the closely packed trees.
"Do you want to talk?"
he asks, a frown deeply etched on his face. "I know you said not to stop for anything."
"Or anyone."
"Or anyone," I say. "But she needed help."
"How do you know that she wasn't part of an ambush or a trap?"
"An ambush? We're not in a war." He looks sharply at me, and his eyes narrow.
"Yes, we are,"
he says.
"This is a war of survival now. Did you forget what happened earlier?"
"No."
"Good. What are we doing here?"
"I'm trying to get home."
"Exactly. And if you want to get home, you have to stay focused on that goal, on seeing your sister and your mother."
"I thought Angela told you that you should help everyone you can."
"She did. But helping everyone you can doesn't mean helping everyone."
He turns and we ride for another few minutes before he stops suddenly and sits for a few moments.
"Shit,"
he says, before turning Thorn back toward the highway.
"Come on."
He shakes his head in exasperation. "Where are we going?" I ask, wheeling Raven around and then trotting a little faster to catch up to him.
"You know where we're going,"
he says, without looking over at me. It only takes us about 15 minutes to reach the highway again. We ride out onto the pavement, and we look down the road in the direction of Dollar General.
Do you see them?
George asks me. No.
Let's ride down that way. She couldn't have gotten that far.
Okay, I say with a nod. Within about 5 minutes, I spot the young woman walking near the shoulder of the road, carrying her baby in a car seat carrier. I prod Raven forward, and as we approach, she stops and turns, a worried expression on her face. George rides up alongside me.
How far away do you live?
He asks. We're from Alabama, she replies. We're coming up to visit my parents.
Where are they?
George asks. They live in Nashville. George shakes his head.
We can't go to Nashville,
he says, partially to her and partially to me. But, I start to say. He puts a couple of fingers up to silence me gently.
I know some place we can take you,
he says.
Someplace you'll be safe.
He climbs down from Thorn, but the young woman seems leery and takes a step back while holding her infant protectively. George's facial expression softens and he smiles at her.
What's your name?
He asks. Cecilia.
And your little one?
Maya. His smile grows when he hears the name.
That was my mother's name,
he says. Cecilia smiles back at him and seems to relax. Suddenly, the little baby she's carrying starts to stir, opening its eyes and looking at us a little warily. You said Maya? I ask, before slipping off Raven, keeping her reins in my hand. Yeah, Cecilia says, smiling warmly at her baby as she lifts her out of her carrier. She's adorable, I say, and I wave at her with 2 fingers. Maya hides her face in Cecilia's shoulder. Thank you, she says, gently stroking the child's back.
Have you ever ridden a horse?
George asks. A few times when I was a girl.
Well, I don't suppose anything's changed, he says.
Probably not. How far is this safe place? I ask George.
About 3 miles that way,
he says, pointing in the opposite direction of the Dollar General and all the chaos around it. It's going to be hard to ride and hold a baby, I say.
Yeah, I suppose you're right,
George says. Can you make 3 miles? I ask Cecilia. No problem, she replies. I look at Maya and smile. What about you? I ask. She smiles at me and then buries her face in her mother's shoulder again. I'll take that as a yes.
You can stop right there,
a voice says, the speaker unseen. We're standing in front of a small, old-fashioned motel. It's a single-level wood and brick building with a dozen rooms in a U-shaped structure and a tiny office on one end. There are trees all around us, and it feels so isolated that I can't imagine how the place manages to stay in business.
It's me,
George shouts as he climbs down from Thorn's back. For a few seconds, nothing happens, and then the door to the office opens, and a man steps out, a shotgun in his hands. He looks to be about the same age as George. His hair is slightly darker and slightly longer, and he sports an impressive beard and mustache. He stands just outside the office, his eyes flitting over each of us. A second later, a woman emerges behind him. She looks a bit younger, with long blonde hair drawn up into a bun on top of her head. "Put that damn thing away," she says to the man. "Can't you see it's George, for God's sake?"
"Well, I don't know these other two,"
he grumbles, before slowly lowering the weapon. "They're with him, so they must be okay," she says, before walking up to George and wrapping her arms around him. The two embrace for a few seconds, and then she turns to me. "And what might your name be?" she asks. "Lydia." "Well, welcome, Lydia," she says. "My name is Lola, and this is my husband, Oliver." "Glad to meet you," I say. smiling at her and giving him a nod. He returns the gesture and then sets the shotgun down, leaning it up against one of the porch posts.
"And your friend?"
Lola asks, turning her attention to Cecilia and Maya.
"Cecilia,"
she replies, "and this is my daughter Maya."
"She's beautiful,"
she says, smiling at her and tapping Maya playfully on the nose. Then she turns back to George.
"So, George, what the hell is going on?" "I think you know as much as we do,"
he replies.
"An EMP event,"
she says.
"Yeah, it knocked out everything."
"We're well aware," Lola says with a frown.
"You should hear something."
I look over at him and he shrugs before she turns and starts walking back toward the office.
"Can we talk about something first?"
George asks.
"I think you should hear this and then we can talk,"
Oliver says. He opens the door to the office, holding it so we can all enter. The room is small, but neat and clean, with a short wooden counter that takes up the majority of the space. Lola lifts a little flip-down shelf, steps behind the check-in desk, and then turns to the right almost immediately and opens a hatch in the floor. She starts descending a set of stairs, and George turns and glances at me.
"That's okay,"
he says, before following her down. "I'll just wait here," Cecilia says, giving me a slightly nervous smile. "Okay." I start down the steps and I immediately notice the walls are covered in some sort of foil-like material, including the underside of the hatch. The room at the bottom of the stairs is spacious and filled with shelves and shelves of plastic containers, much like the storage area at George's. A line of bare bulbs hanging from the ceiling illuminate the space. Lola strides over to a desk at the far end of the room and sits down in the single office chair. 6 televisions are mounted on the wall, and the text, "Please stand by," is displayed on the monitors. "Wait a minute," I say. "Why are these working?"
"Faraday,"
Lola replies without looking back at me. "Faraday?"
"It's a sort of insulation designed to protect the items inside from EMP damage,"
George says.
"It's called a Faraday box." "We installed it a few years ago,"
Oliver says.
"I mean, the televisions still work, but no one is transmitting, and all our power is coming from a gas-powered generator that was down here as well."
"Okay," Lola says. "Here you go." She flips a few switches on a very complicated but archaic-looking radio construct sitting on the desk.
"For restoration. For the immediate future, find a secure location and remain there for as long as possible. This message will be updated. Stay tuned. Communication ends, message repeats."
The radio goes silent, and George looks at Lola.
"That's it?"
he asks.
"Hold on, it'll start again."
A few seconds later, the flat, toneless voice begins again.
"This is an emergency message from the United States Department of Defense. The mainland and outlying territories of the United States of America have suffered catastrophic damage from an EMP, or electromagnetic pulse event. From what information can be gathered, this was a naturally occurring incident and not the result of any sort of hostile action. This event appears to be global in nature and has destroyed or disabled 99% of electronic communications, including all satellite and cellular systems, as well as virtually all computerized networks, including the global internet, vehicle, rail, and air travel. Please be aware not to expect any sort of assistance from the federal government until further notice. At this time, there is no timeline for restoration or services. For the immediate future, find a secure location and remain there for as long as possible. This message will be updated. Stay tuned. Communication ends, message repeats."
Lola switches off the radio, turns around in her chair and faces us.
"I guess that's that,"
she says.
"Seems like it,"
George says. There's a quiet gasp behind us, and we turn to see Cecilia on the steps, her free hand over her mouth. "What does all that mean?" she asks.
"It means the world just got fucked,"
Lola says with a quiet little chuckle.
"Yeah, so that's sort of what we came to talk to you about,"
George says, looking at Lola and Oliver. Chapter 7.
"You're leaving?"
Lola asks as we're standing outside the office again.
"I'm taking Lydia home,"
George says.
"She and her dad were flying on a private plane when everything happened. He didn't make it, I take it,"
Lola says sadly. "No," I say, and she takes a step forward and pulls me into a warm, loving embrace.
"Where's home?"
Lola asks when she steps back. "Outside Chicago." Lola shakes her head.
"Wait a minute. You're riding horses all the way to Chicago?" she asks. "Yeah, I guess so."
"Have you lost your mind?"
"I don't think so."
"Why are you doing this?"
"Because Angela would have wanted him to,"
Oliver says, and George nods.
"Yeah, plus it's the right thing to do. And speaking of that,"
George says, looking towards Cecilia and Mia,
"this brings us to why we're here."
"Does it?" Lola asks with a sly little grin.
"I was hoping Cecilia and her little one could stay with you for a bit until things calm down. Or at least get a little less dangerous. Her parents are up around Nashville, but I don't think it's safe to head that way right now."
"Of course she can stay here," Lola says. "We have the room, that's for sure." "I don't want to be a bother," Cecilia says.
"Don't you worry about that, dear,"
Lola says.
"You're welcome to stay as long as you need."
"Thank you," she says. And I can see that she's close to tears.
"Oh, and if you need any supplies while I'm gone, like food or water, feel free to take what you need from my place,"
George says. Lola gives him a sideways look.
"You are coming back, right?"
she asks.
"Yeah."
"Uh-huh," she says.
"Well, we'll look after your place while you're gone." "I appreciate that. You don't think this thing is going to get better anytime soon, do you?"
Oliver asks.
"Not if you believe that message." "Do you believe it?" "Yes, sir. I'm afraid I do."
"All right, then," he says, before offering his hand. The two men shake, and then Lola steps up, and they embrace for a few seconds. "I don't know how to thank you," Cecilia says, stepping up to George.
"There's no need. You just take care of my friends here,"
he replies, and she nods, and Mia holds out her arms for him. He smiles at the little girl and lets her grab onto his finger, squeezing and turning it for a few seconds before releasing him. Cecilia and I embrace, and I rub her back before stepping away. "I know it was you who convinced him to come back for me," she says, grinning at me. "Sort of, but he pretty much changed his mind all by himself," I reply, looking at him and grinning. I climb up into the saddle and turn Raven so she's facing the little group. George boosts himself up onto Thorn with an audible grunt.
"Be careful,"
Lola says.
"You too,"
he says, before giving them a little wave and then turning Thorn back toward the road. "Bye," I say. And I start to turn Raven when Lola places her hand on my leg.
"Take care of him,"
she says. "I will," I reply, smiling at her. "I promise."
"Wait, hold on a minute,"
Oliver says, and he turns suddenly and rushes back into the house.
"What's he doing?"
George asks.
"I don't know,"
Lola replies. A minute later, Oliver emerges from the office with 2 small walkie-talkies in his hands. He walks over and hands one to me and one to George.
"Take these with you. They might come in handy,"
he says. "They work?" I ask.
"I wouldn't give them to you if they didn't,"
he says, smiling at me. I didn't mean it like that. I sort of meant how come they still work.
Oh, yeah, they were down in the basement in the Faraday room. You'll just have to find batteries for them along the way if they need them.
Batteries still work?
Sure, they should. The EMP wouldn't have affected ones that were still in the packaging, at least. Thanks, Oliver,
George says.
My pleasure.
George and I prod our horses forward, leaving the motel behind in the trees. You think she'll be okay there? I ask.
Oh, yeah. Lola and Oliver are good people. They'll take care of her.
Thank you for doing that. He looks over at me and smiles.
Well, as I said back there, it was the right thing to do. Just took me a little while to realize that.
It only matters that you did. We ride for a while in silence, heading north across rolling hills and heavily wooded patches, until we reach Interstate 65. We pause at the edge of the road, making sure it's clear before we emerge from the trees, cross the 4 lanes, and then slip into the woods on the other side. Where are we headed? I ask, about 10 minutes after leaving the highway.
I think we're going to make our way up toward Litchfield.
How far is that?
Maybe 40 miles.
We can't make that today, can we?
I doubt it. As soon as it starts to get dark, we need to stop. It's too dangerous to travel through these woods and hills if we can't see where we're going.
That makes sense, I reply. We ride for another 3 or 4 hours, taking it slow as we move through the trees. Eventually, the woods recede, and we reach a small single-lane road that cuts through the middle of some wild meadows and fields. We begin riding side by side along the dusty dirt road, keeping a leisurely pace.
So you were down here for an archery competition?
George asks. Yeah, I reply.
Are you good?
2nd place.
So you are good,
he says, grinning at me. It wasn't 1st place.
Is it usually?
Most of the time.
Well, there's always someone better waiting in the wings,
George says.
You just have to be proud of what you've accomplished.
Yeah, that's what my dad says. It used to say. I blurt out before getting a sudden stabbing in my heart. George nods and then reaches out and pats my leg gently.
It's okay,
he says. Still can't believe it, or at least a part of me can't, I say, turning my head so I can wipe my eyes and nose without him seeing.
That's the way things go with stuff like this,
he says.
Do you want to talk about it?
Not right now, I say, taking a deep breath and then releasing it almost immediately.
Okay,
he says quietly before turning his attention back to the road. A few minutes later, we encounter a barbed wire fence that encloses the field on the right side.
Let's keep an eye open for people,
George says. Yeah, I reply, sitting up a little straighter in the saddle and scanning the meadows and woods in the distance. I glance down at the road, and there are no tire tracks or any other indications that anyone has been down this route in a long time. The grass in the meadow is nearly as tall as the fence, and many of the posts are either tilted or completely uprooted. We ride for another half hour, and then a small house appears in the distance. George slows down and then eventually brings Thorne to a stop. He pulls his binoculars out of his saddlebag and studies the house. I glass the surrounding countryside with my telescope, searching for any other signs of people or civilization. Do you see anyone? I ask.
No, the house looks abandoned.
Recently?
I don't think so.
Stay there for the night?
Let's check it out and see.
We prod the horses forward, keeping our eyes on the house as we draw closer. When we reach the end of the old dirt driveway, it's obvious that the little farmhouse has been abandoned for many years. The front porch is barely hanging on, and there are holes in the roof. But otherwise it looks safe enough to shelter us for the night. There's a run-down red and white barn about 20 yards away. The door is wide open. We slip off our horses and lead them down the ghostly remains of the path from the road to the house. George pulls his old rifle from its leather scabbard and levers a cartridge into the chamber. I grab my bow and 2 arrows, clipping one into the side quiver on my belt and notching the other on the string. He points to the right side of the house, and I nod, releasing Raven's reins and moving quickly through the overgrown front yard to the corner of the old home. Grasping vines cover the siding, and their thin little arms cling to the windows and gutters. I peer over the end of the arrow as I move, sweeping it from right to left. When I reach the back of the house, I turn the corner and spot George as he comes around on the other side.
Clear?
He asks. Clear, I reply. No one's been here for a long time.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
I'll get the horses, I say. And he shakes his head.
Let them graze for a little. Let's see what the inside looks like.
10 minutes later, we walk out into the slightly wobbly front porch after searching the house. The interior consists of a tiny kitchen, a small front room, a little bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. There's nothing inside save 1 wooden chair in the kitchen. Every surface is covered in dust, and there are spider webs galore, but it seems safe enough to stay in.
I've seen worse,
George says. I'd like to say I have, but I haven't. George laughs.
Well, we should make something for dinner and get a fire going. So, do you want to take care of the horses or do that other stuff?
What do I need to do?
With the horses?
Yeah.
You need to take the bridle, reins, and saddles off them and brush them down. You also need to check their hooves for anything that might be stuck in them, like stones or other stuff. You know how to do that, right?
Yeah, of course.
Good. And then they need water.
Where are we going to get that? He turns and walks off the porch and around the side of the house, and then points to a line of trees in the distance.
See those trees?
He asks, moving his hand as he speaks. Yeah.
There'll be some water over there, maybe a creek or a pond.
How do you know?
First off, they wouldn't have built this farm here if there wasn't water nearby,
he says.
Secondly, I just know.
We're going to need a bucket or something, I say. I'll go check the barn.
Okay. So does the horses or the prepping for you?
He asks. I'll take care of the horses. I need the practice, although you might need to help me with the hooves. My dad usually took care of that.
We can do that,
he says, smiling warmly at me, perhaps knowing that the mention of my dad pierced my heart. I'll be right back, I say, before heading down toward the old barn. The structure seems to be in about the same condition as the house, run down but still serviceable. I walk in through the open sliding doors and pause for a moment, searching for a bucket or any sort of container that we could use to transport water. It only takes me a few seconds to find 3 metal pails, each of them filled with cobwebs and dust. I use an old straw broom to clean them out as best I can, before carrying them outside and back to the house.
Those'll work,
George says.
I think we could both go down to collect it. We're going to need all 3, 2 for the horses and 1 for cooking.
Sounds like a plan. We leave the horses in the front yard to graze on the bright green grass. They'll be okay by themselves? I ask.
They'll be good. They know not to wander away.
If you say so, I say. And we pick up the 3 buckets and head through the field toward the trees and the supposed water supply. George looks at me and grins slyly.
You don't think there's any water down there, do you?
He asks, gesturing toward the tree line in the distance. I don't know, I just don't know how you know. He smiles at me.
Well, it's good for you to be doubtful,
he says.
You can't believe everything everyone says.
So you don't know if there's any water there?
No, I know there is,
he says.
On these flat meadows, when you see a cluster of trees, they're only growing there because there's a water supply.
What if it's underground?
Then we're sort of screwed, he says, before pointing to the trees again. But you see how the line of trees just meanders along there?
Yeah.
That's a strong indication that there's a creek or a stream.
How do you know all that?
My daddy taught me, he says. He knew a lot about this sort of stuff.
A minute later, we step into the trees, and almost immediately we're forced to stop at the edge of a short drop-down to a gurgling little stream. George doesn't say anything. He just smiles at me, and I shake my head. "That's one for you," I say, and he laughs.
Fair enough.
I scramble down the little slope to the edge of the water, and he hands the buckets down to me. I take a few minutes to rinse each one out before filling them and handing them one by one up to him. He helps me climb back up, and then we head back to the house. I have one of the buckets, and he's carrying the other two. "I can take one of those," I say.
"I've got them,"
he says. "Okay." When we get to the house, George heads inside, and I lead the horses around the back of the house to the old barn. I strip off their bridles and reins, and then slip off their saddles and blankets and drape them over a pair of old sawhorses I discovered in the corner of the barn. I bring one of the buckets over for each horse, holding them while they drink their fill. And when they're done, I retrieve the brushes from the saddlebags, and I carefully groom each horse, taking nearly an hour to finish up. When I'm almost done, George walks into the barn and smiles at me.
"All done?"
he asks. "Except for their hooves," I say. He walks over and examines each of the horses, running his hand along their necks, backs, and flanks, and then nods at me.
"Good job," he says. "Can you get me that other brush out of the bag? It's the red and black one with the bristles on the one end and the little metal spike on the other."
I search through the pack until I find the tool he's talking about and bring it over to him. "Is this the one?"
"Yeah, that's it."
He walks over to Raven and stands next to her while facing her rear. He runs his hand down her leg and then bends and lifts it, tucking the hoof between his legs. He talks to her the whole time, telling her what he's doing, trying to keep her calm, I suppose. But she's probably so used to him that she doesn't seem to react at all to what he's doing. I watch as he uses the bristles to clean the bottom of her hoof. He leans a little closer and examines her foot before flipping the tool over and using the metal prong to dislodge a small stone. Then George brushes her hoof one final time before gently lowering her leg to the ground.
"You think you can do that?"
he asks, stepping over and handing me the brush. "Yeah, I think so. I've done it a few times back home."
"That's with horses you know, and that know you. You need to be a little more cautious with horses you don't know. Make sure you talk to her while you're working."
"Why do you talk to them? They know you." He smiles and then sighs.
"I suppose it gives me someone to talk to," he replies.
"Yeah," I say quietly, and I spot the look of sadness in his eyes. But then he seems to push it away, and the smile returns to his face.
"Are you okay to do it? Do you need me to stay for the first one?"
"I think I got it."
"All right. I'll be out back of the house getting our dinner ready. Come get me if you need me."
"Okay." He nods and then turns and walks out. I look at Raven. She turns her head and stares at me with those huge brown eyes. "You okay with this?" I ask. And I swear she nods. She might have just been moving her head to dislodge a fly. By the time I'm done, my hands and my jeans are filthy and I smell like a horse. But I don't care. I walk Thorn and Raven out to the front of the little house again, slightly surprised that they follow me without reins or ropes. They pass by me, rubbing their heads against my arm as they move to a nice grazing spot in the overgrown front yard. Chapter 8. "That smells pretty good," I say as I walk around the back of the house where George is tending a small fire. An old speckled pot is sitting on the coals, a dark brown stew bubbling within it.
Don't get too excited,
he says, looking up at me.
These things tend to smell better than they taste.
These things? I sit on the ground, crossing my legs.
Prepper food. Some of them can be pretty rough.
Well, I'm starving, so anything would be good at this point.
You may regret those words,
he says, grinning at me before turning to stir the pot. I guess we'll find out.
Yep. Anyway, how did you get on with the horses?
Great, no problems at all.
That's good. Thorn and Raven have always been cooperative when it comes to grooming. And it's good to know that you seem to have the touch.
That's what my dad used to say, I say, getting a sudden sick feeling in my stomach.
You guys have a ranch, right?
Yeah.
Crops or cattle?
Bit of both, I reply. We grow mostly corn. We have a few dozen heads of cattle, along with some sheep and chickens.
A little variety, huh?
Exactly. He picks up 2 small silver plates off the ground, scoops a portion of the stew into each one, and then sets a few crackers around the rim. He hands me the dish along with a spoon.
Careful, it's pretty hot.
Okay. The sun is just starting to drop below the horizon, far off to the west, but there's still plenty of light in the sky. I set the plate in my lap and scoop a spoonful of the thick brown stew into my mouth. George watches me, a little grin on his face before he takes his first bite of dinner.
Well,
he asks. I think you're probably right, I say.
Yeah, I warned you.
Yes, you did, I say, taking another mouthful. We eat for a little while in silence, just listening to the birds, insects, and other sounds drifting through the little farm.
How long have you had the farm?
It was my great-grandfather's. He started it sometime in the late 1800s, I think.
Your grandpa took it over and then your dad, right?
Yeah.
That's good. Is it something you want to continue?
I sit for a few moments, just looking at the fire, before turning back to him. I never really thought about it before, I say, but I guess I have to now. He looks at me thoughtfully, and then reaches over and pats my knee.
That's something for later, he says. Right now, we just have to think about getting you home.
I nod and swallow my pain and my grief. We return to our meals again, and by the time we're done, darkness has started to fall. I'll clean the dishes, I say, trying to distract myself with some menial tasks.
Okay, I'll go get some more wood on the fire.
Sounds like a plan. I scrape off the remains into the pot, and then head over behind the barn and dump the scraps into the tall grass. I return to the half-filled bucket of water and rinse off everything, and then set them near the fire to dry. George, meanwhile, has retrieved our blankets and bedrolls from the barn and laid them out near the fire. We're not sleeping inside? I ask.
The place is full of spiders. You're welcome to, but I'm sleeping out here.
I think I'll follow your lead, I say with a shiver. George laughs.
I thought you'd feel that way.
We sit around the crackling fire for some time in silence, and then eventually I look over at him. Did I thank you for this? I ask.
I think you did.
Well, I'm gonna do it again. Thank you for everything you're doing for me. You didn't have to do anything when I showed up at your door, and now you're helping me get back to my family, I say, my eyes slowly filling with tears. George nods, and I can tell he's getting choked up as well.
Well, if the world's going in the direction that I think it is, and by what we saw back at the Dollar General, I think it is, we're all going to need to help each other if we're going to survive.
Yeah, it seems like it. We both pull our blankets around ourselves and lie on our bedrolls. It's not chilly in any way, but it feels good to lie down close to the warmth of the fire. Do you think we need to set a watch? I ask.
I think we'll be okay for tonight. This is pretty isolated, but starting tomorrow, depending on where we end up staying, I think we'll have to consider it.
That sounds good. For a little while, I lie on my back, staring up at the sky, amazed at all the colors and the stunning amount of stars that are visible when there's no light pollution. There are massive clusters of blue and purple, swirls of tiny pinpoints of light, and everything is brighter, more majestic than I could have possibly imagined.
Pretty, isn't it?
George asks from the other side of the slowly fading campfire. Yeah.
I was the same way the first time I saw it, he says. It literally blew my mind.
I never knew there were so many stars. It's so beautiful.
I would have figured you might have seen it sometime, living on a farm.
You'd think that, but we're not that far from town. And even though it was small, I never saw anything like this.
I think we'll be seeing a lot of this from now on, he says.
Yeah, I guess we will.
All right, now get some sleep. We've got an early start tomorrow.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Sometime later, I feel someone shaking me by the shoulder. I look up groggily, and I open my eyes. My breath catches in my chest as I look into the face of my father staring down at me. He's bloody and pale, and he leans in close.
You just left me there,
he says, his voice harsh and twisted. I sit bolt upright, screaming and flailing my arms. And a moment later, I feel someone holding me tight.
It's all right,
I hear George say.
It's all right.
I grab his arms in a vice-like grip and rock back and forth as the tears come like rain. The next morning, I wake to the sound and smell of bacon sizzling in a pan over the fire. George is tending to the food and the flames. The sun isn't even fully up over the trees to the east. I sit up and stretch, moaning as my back reminds me that I slept on the ground. You should have woken me up. I could have helped, I say.
That's okay. You needed the sleep. And I like cooking,
he says, smiling at me. Well, what can I do? I ask.
You could pack up your bedroll and stuff and then come back and sit down and eat with me.
Okay, I reply. And I start collecting my belongings after glancing over, noticing that his supplies are already gone. I roll up my bed, fold the blanket, and head over to the barn. As soon as I turn the corner of the house, I spot the horses, saddled and ready to go. I shake my head, tie my stuff to the back of the saddle, and pat Raven on the neck. Morning, girl, I say. She looks at me, and then seems to nod, before returning to her grazing in the front yard. By the time I get back to the fire, George has a plate heaped with bacon and eggs, as well as a couple of slices of toasted bread, slathered with some sort of jelly waiting for me. Where did all this food come from? I ask, taking the plate from him and sitting down on the grass.
I didn't come unprepared,
he says, grinning at me. But bacon and eggs, how do you keep them cold?
Eggs don't really need to be refrigerated, he says. And the bacon is fully cooked already, so it can stay fresh for several weeks. Dig in. We've got to get on the road.
I start in on the food while George adjusts an old blue tin coffee pot on the fire.
You drink coffee?
Yeah.
Real coffee? I don't mean that fancy Starbucks stuff.
I like it black with a little sugar, I reply, before spooning some more eggs into my mouth.
You continue to surprise me, he says.
My friends say I'm weird. He chuckles quietly. We both start eating again. When I'm almost done, I put the spoon down and look at him. Thank you for last night, I say quietly. I'm sorry I fell apart. He looks at me and frowns.
First off, I never want to hear you apologize for something like that. You're grieving. You have every right to cry, scream, or do whatever you need to do. Secondly, you're quite welcome. It was my deepest privilege to be here for you.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'll try to control myself better. He tilts his head to the side slightly and frowns again.
Did you not just hear what I said?
He asks. I heard you.
Then you need to listen. If you need to cry, then cry. If you need to scream, then scream. And if you need to be left alone, tell me to get the fuck away from you.
I shake my head and smile at him. I gotcha, I say.
Good. Now let's finish up and get on the road.
I nod and clean the rest of my plate. By the way, did you settle up the horses and everything?
Well, I'm the only other person here.
What time did you get up?
Like 4.
Cripes, why?
It's just something I do.
To each their own, I guess. He stands and starts smothering the fire with dirt and gravel.
Come on, he says. It's time to get on the road.
About 20 minutes later, we're riding down the narrow dirt track through the low rolling hills and thick groves of trees. We ride side by side for the next hour, passing no one and seeing nothing that indicates that anyone lives in the area. Eventually, we come upon a rusting sign for Highway 68. George slows Thorne, and we come to a stop.
Let's be careful up here,
he says. I nod and sit up a little straighter in my saddle. Where are we headed?
I was looking at the map this morning. I think if we cross the highway and continue north, we'll hit the little town of Oakland.
Do we need to avoid it? He shakes his head and frowns.
Maybe. It's pretty small. I'm not even sure how many people live there, but we still need to be careful.
We're going to ride through it then?
If there's no other easy way around it, but we'll have to see when we get there.
Okay. We start moving again, following the old dirt road until it emerges from the trees and intersects with the much larger highway. We sit on our horses for a few minutes, just studying the road and the surrounding terrain. I can see 2 cars about a mile or so down the highway to the west, but there's no sign of the drivers.
Come on,
George says. We spur our mounts forward and clop across the hard asphalt surface. We re-enter the woods on the other side. There's no road or path to follow, so we just keep moving north. Our pace is cut nearly in half as we make our way through the thickly forested terrain. Several times we're forced to change direction, to find a place to cross an unexpected gully or navigate around some impassable obstacle. Eventually we come across another dirt road, running roughly east and west. We sit for a few seconds, while George seems to consider the best route to take. It's like waiting for Gandalf to decide which way to take in Moria, I say. And George looks at me and grins.
Let's hope I choose better than he did,
he replies with a grin. He made the right choice in the end.
Yeah, and they ran into a troll.
And a Balrog.
Yeah, let's try to avoid that,
he says, chuckling quietly. I guess you know the rings, huh?
It was my favorite book when I was growing up. Although I have to admit, the first time I tried reading it, I quit halfway through.
He prods Thorne forward, and we turn to the west. But you eventually finished it, right?
I did, after picking it up and starting over 2 years later.
I did pretty much the same thing. He laughs, and we turn our attention back to the road. About 15 minutes later, the first buildings around Oakland come into view in the distance. We stop. George grabs the binoculars from his saddlebag and studies them for a few minutes. What do you think? I ask.
Can't see much,
he says. I didn't ask what you could see. I asked what you think, I say, lowering my little telescope. I can't see shit either.
You're pretty direct, aren't you?
My mama told me that that's the only way to be, especially when you're a woman. I reply, grinning at him.
Wise lady.
Yes, she is. So?
I think we can risk it,
he says, before packing away the binoculars, and then pulling the rifle from its scabbard and resting it on the pommel of the saddle. "What's that about?" I ask.
"It doesn't hurt to be prepared,"
he replies. Chapter 9. As we approach the first little house on the outskirts of Oakland, I have my pistol resting in my lap. An older man in a blue flannel shirt looks at us from the porch. He nods to us and we respond in kind. We leave him behind, but I keep looking back, just to be sure he isn't following us. He isn't.
"So far, so good,"
George says. "Yeah," I say, swallowing hard. My throat is dry, and my heart is pounding in my chest. We pass a couple of abandoned houses and small businesses before reaching the main road that runs north and south through the middle of Oakland. A couple of people are out in the yards, or tinkering with their cars, and they don't even seem to notice us. "They're never going to start, are they?" I ask, as we make the turn to the north.
"I don't think so."
We keep moving, riding slowly down the road, sometimes having to weave in and out of cars and trucks sitting idle where they died. I peer down the street, and I spot a wooden barrier across the road, and two men with rifles standing guard. A couple of cars have been moved into place to create a sort of makeshift checkpoint between an old gas station and a long-abandoned store of some sort. "You see that?" I ask George, and he nods.
"I see it."
"What do we do?"
"We just keep riding,"
he says.
"But stay alert."
I nod. I pick up my pistol and hold it in my right hand after switching the reins to my left. As we draw closer, one of the men steps forward and puts his hand up.
"You can stop there,"
he says, his tone matter-of-fact without any anger or real forcefulness. George looks over at me and nods, and we both stop a few yards from the wooden barrier. The man, dressed in blue jeans and a yellow t-shirt, studies us for a few seconds. He has a hunting rifle in his hands and a pistol tucked into his belt.
"Just stay calm,"
George says without looking at me.
"Morning,"
the man says.
"Morning,"
George replies.
"Where you headed?" "North."
The man nods. I glance at his companion, but he doesn't seem that interested in us or what we're doing here.
"You're not gonna cause any problems, right?"
the man in the yellow shirt asks.
"No, sir." "Your rifle might suggest otherwise."
George looks down at the old lever-action rifle and then back at the man.
"Yours might suggest that as well."
The man grins and then nods.
"That's fair enough. The world's changed since a couple of days ago," he says. "You have to protect what's yours."
"That's true," George says with a little nod of his head, his hand still resting on the weapon.
"What about you?"
the man asks, addressing me this time. "I'm just with him," I say, gesturing toward George.
"Just heading north, right?"
"Yes, sir," I reply, following George's lead. The man nods again, and then he turns and looks at his companion. He gestures with his head, and the other man moves the barrier aside, opening up a space for us to squeeze through. As we're passing by the barrier, the man looks at us again.
"Take care of yourselves,"
he says.
"You too,"
George replies. As soon as we're through the gap, the two men move the barrier back into place. It's then that I notice the men standing or sitting on the roofs of a couple of nearby buildings with rifles in hand.
"I see them,"
George says. "This is how the world is now?" I ask.
"This or worse."
"It didn't take long, did it?"
"No, it didn't,"
he says, a sad tone to his voice. Most of the small cars and trucks have been moved off to the sides of the road, lined up neatly along the shoulder. The farther we ride into town, the more people we encounter. Many of them nod or wave to us, and we return the gesture, but they immediately return to their work. A few of them are armed, but in many cases, the weapons are propped up against the sides of buildings or trees, while the owners are working on their tasks, such as weeding gardens or tending the plants. A few minutes later, we approach a low brick building where a small crowd of people are gathered. They have some tables set up and boxes of items that they're passing out to people. When they see us riding in their direction, a couple of them break away and walk over to us. "Morning," a young woman in jeans and a tank top says, while wiping her brow with a bright red handkerchief.
"Morning,"
George replies. "Where are you coming from?" she asks. A couple of other people walk up and join her, including a few younger children.
"Down south a little bit,"
George says. "Is it bad?"
"It's not good," he replies. "We came by Bowling Green. There was a Dollar General there and people were raiding it. There was at least one dead body in the parking lot and people were stepping over it like it was a pile of garbage."
The woman shakes her head, and some of the others gasp or whisper amongst themselves.
"Have you heard if any help is coming?"
a young man in the little crowd asks.
"It ain't,"
George says.
"What do you mean it ain't?"
"He means no one's coming," I say.
"How do you know?"
"We heard a radio transmission from Washington."
"How did you do that? I didn't think anything worked anymore,"
the woman asks, stepping into the conversation. "Friends of ours had some equipment in a
Faraday room,"
George says, finishing my statement.
"What's that?" "It's just a specially insulated storage area. It protected their stuff from the EMP burst."
"So I guess we're really on our own," the young woman says.
"I'd say so,"
George says.
"But it looks like you have things under control."
"I don't know if I'd go that far," she says. "But we're trying. We have a Dollar General here too, but when we figured out what happened, we closed it down, set some guards, and then reopened it the next day and started handing out things that people needed. We even hooked up a few generators to run the fridges and freezers."
"That's smart,"
George says. "Thanks."
"But things are going to get a lot worse before they get better," he says. "When people learn what you have here, they're going to come for it."
"Let them," she says, a tone of fierce determination in her voice. "They'll find a welcome they won't like."
"Don't let that keep you from accepting people into your group, though. You're going to need all the friends you can get."
"Understand," she says. "That's why we let you in. You're welcome to stay." George shakes his head.
"Thanks, but we have a long way to go, and I made a promise I intend to keep."
"I kind of figured, but it was worth asking," she says, sounding a little disappointed.
"You guys take care of yourselves and good luck,"
George says. "You too." We spur our horses forward, and we move away from the little group and back onto the road. We pass a dozen more little houses, as well as some other buildings that have obviously been abandoned for decades. Some other residents wave and nod at us, and we do the same in return, before we finally reach the roadblock at the northern end of town. The two guards open the gate and let us pass through without any trouble, wishing us luck in the process. A few minutes later, we reach a curve in the road, and the little town disappears from view behind us. "You think they'll make it?" I ask. George shrugs.
"I hope so."
Over the remainder of the day, we pass through or around a handful of small towns with names like Brownsville, Huff, Sunfish, and Shrewsbury, among others. We stick close to the road, but not directly on it, moving through meadows, rolling hills, and thickly forested areas. We spot less than 10 people during the day, and we're careful enough that I don't think any of them saw us. As the sun is starting to set, we ride to the top of a rise laced with a line of old pine trees. George brings Thorn to a stop and dismounts, looping the reins over a low branch and retrieving the binoculars from his saddlebag. I slip off Raven and follow George to the edge of the trees. He lies down on the soft bed of needles, and I pull out my spyglass and join him. Down below, alongside a double-lane highway, are two large gas stations with attached convenience stores, one on each side of the road. There are dozens of abandoned cars, pickups, and a handful of tractor-trailers scattered in the parking lots and on the highway itself. I focus in on the station on the right, a Shell Oil with the iconic yellow logo, and I can clearly see the front doors of the store wide open, and several of the windows are shattered.
Do you see anyone?
George asks. Not yet, I reply, without looking at him. You?
No, and that's what worries me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Where did they all go? I ask, slowly sweeping the telescope across the road and over to the other store. And then I spot them. Wait.
What?
George asks. I've got someone.
Where?
Near the box truck by the marathon.
I got him,
George says.
Good eye. What's he doing?
It looks like he's waiting for something, I reply.
He has a rifle.
I saw that, I say, before noticing he keeps looking across the road toward the Shell station. I shift my focus to the other building, sweeping the glass across the parking lot, the abandoned cars and trucks, and then finally the building itself. I'm about to shift back to the man by the truck when I catch a flicker of movement from inside the convenience store. I can see a figure crouched by the doors, and when it moves again, I spot the glimmer of sunshine off the barrel of a rifle. There's someone in the Shell station, I say.
What the hell is going on?
George asks. For a few seconds, I start to think that maybe the two individuals are not connected in any way. They might even be trying to smoke each other out. But then I see the man by the truck signal the other person, and then point farther down the highway to the north. I begin moving my viewpoint up along the road, scanning the cars and trucks sitting idle, as if frozen in time. And then I spot them. 3 people, a man, a woman, and a small child, walk slowly toward the gas stations. They're moving cautiously, pausing by the vehicles they pass before moving on, but they don't look armed. Oh, shit, I say. They're going to ambush that family. George looks back and forth between the men and the little group approaching them. He shakes his head and looks at me.
There's nothing we can do,
George says. We can't let them kill them, I say, looking over at him.
There's nothing we can do,
George says again. The hell there isn't, I say, getting up and jogging back to where Raven is standing amongst the trees. I grab my bow and side quiver and quickly return to the edge of the trees.
What are you doing?
George asks, turning and looking at me. I'm going to stop those guys from killing that family, I reply, fitting an arrow to the string and then quickly checking the tension wheels.
You can't make that shot,
he says, looking back toward where the first man is crouched behind the truck. You don't think so?
We can't get involved in this,
George says.
They may have more friends around here.
If they had more friends, they'd be here, I say, stepping out of the trees and up to the edge of the drop-off.
Lydia, this is dangerous.
Yeah, it is, I reply. The trio is about 100 yards from the marathon, still unaware of the presence of the 2 men. I know I'm exposed as I stand outside the safety of the trees. But the 2 ambushers seem much more interested in their targets than in their surroundings. 90 yards. I pull back the string to the first stage, and then lower my sights until I find the man by the truck. I stand for a moment and feel the breeze, and calculate the distance as best I can. George is standing by my side now, silent and observant. 70. I'm sure he's still not happy about this, but he also knows better than to disturb me when I'm trying to aim. I raise my target point and then shift it slightly to the right to account for the range and the wind. It's a long shot, but I've made longer, and the fact that the target is lower than me gives me a slight advantage, as the arrow doesn't need to work as hard when it's dropping in altitude. Or at least that's what I tell myself. 50. I pull back on the string again, holding it for a moment, and let out the breath I've been holding. I release the string, and the arrow rockets away, slicing through the air like a knife. I lower the bow slightly and watch the man. I can't see the arrow, but a second later the man falls to the ground, gripping his leg and screaming in pain. I quickly notch another arrow before looking up again and sighting the second man. The little family stops moving forward, taking cover behind one of the abandoned cars, as the first man continues screaming. I sight his companion as he creeps out of the shell station, weapon in hand. I pull back the string on the bow, carefully targeting him, but he suddenly turns in our direction, and I can tell that he spots me. He raises his weapon, obviously targeting me, as I stand in the open, the trees behind me. I start to move when I hear the sound of a rifle shot, and then I watch as the man wavers slightly and then collapses to the ground. I turn and look at George. He has the butt of his rifle resting on his thigh. He levers the empty shell out of his weapon, catching it in his hand, before ratcheting a fresh round into the chamber. I thought we couldn't get involved, I say.
You got us involved. I was just helping out, he replies,
giving me a little sideways grin and a shake of the head. He comes to the edge of the slope and looks down at the man by the truck, still lying on the ground, grasping his leg and rolling slowly back and forth.
We should go and finish this up,
George says, before turning and walking back toward the horses. What do you mean, finish it up? I ask, following after him.
Well,
he says, boosting himself up into the saddle.
We can't just leave things as they are. Come on.
He turns Thorn around and starts riding slowly out of the trees and down the hill toward the gas stations. I stand there, watching him for a moment before climbing into the saddle and prodding Raven forward, following him slowly down the slope. When we reach the bottom of the hill, George rides directly for the man screaming by the truck. He stops a few paces away and dismounts, grabbing his rifle out of the scabbard, and then turning and waiting for me. I slip off Raven and walk over to him. As soon as I'm down, George turns and walks over to the man. He looks up at us, his hands holding his thigh where my arrow is sticking out.
You shot me with a fucking arrow,
he says, bits of slobber dripping from the corner of his mouth.
Shut up,
George says, before turning to me.
Well, we gotta finish up.
We're not killing him, I say. The man looks up at us, fear in his eyes.
Well, that's right,
he says.
Listen to her.
Shut up, I say, glaring down at him, and he whimpers and then falls silent.
Then what's your plan here? You started this.
Yeah, and that little family got away. That's what I was trying to do. He nods and looks down at the man.
He might come after us,
George says.
I won't,
the man says.
I promise. I said shut up,
George says. And he slams the butt of his rifle into his face, and the man falls back unconscious. I'm trying to follow your rules. Only kill if you have to, I say, trying to be firm. But I can feel my hands shaking slightly. George nods.
So you meant to shoot him in the leg?
I'm an archery grand champion, I say. I hit my target.
All right, then,
he says, grinning at me and then leaning down and picking up the man's rifle. He looks it over for a second, and then takes hold of the stock and slams the barrel into the corner of the truck. It bends severely to the right, and he tosses it onto the ground again. "What now?" I ask.
"Now we check the stores and then get the hell out of here before someone else comes along."
I crouch next to the man and run my fingers along the shaft of the arrow sticking out of his leg and shake my head. "Bent the damn thing," I say.
"You can't fix it?"
"No, it'll never fly true again."
"Oh well, maybe we can find some replacements somewhere along the way."
"Yeah."
"So which one do you want, the shell or the marathon?"
"We'll take the shell," I reply.
"All right, make sure you grab the other rifle on your way back. Might be worth keeping."
"Okay,"
"No more than 10 minutes,
he says. "Okay."
and take the handgun with you."
"I already have it,"
"Good girl,"
he says with a little wink. I jog across the highway and into the parking lot for the Shell station. There are about half a dozen cars and pickups scattered about. Some of them are in parking spaces, but the majority are frozen in the midst of whatever they were doing when everything stopped. I step up onto the sidewalk and pass by the other shooter, just glancing at him as I move through the open front doors and into the store. Inside, the place is a mess. Shelves are overturned, the coolers are open, and most of the doors are shattered. The cash register is lying on its side, coins scattered on the floor. I move slowly through the space, a pistol in my hand, listening for any sign of occupants or intruders. I step over empty pop cans, torn boxes, and discarded bags of chips or other snacks. I stop in front of a display for a variety of beef jerky. All the little plastic hooks are empty, but I spot the corner of a bag peeking out from underneath a half-crushed can of Pepsi on the floor. I pick it up, stuffing the pouch into my pocket. I take another 5 minutes or so to search through the wreckage of the store, and I emerge with a cardboard box filled with 6 bottles of water, 4 cans of Coke, 2 Dr. Peppers, and an orange crush. I also have 2 additional bags of jerky and a crumpled container of Pringles. I exit the store, step back out into the sidewalk, and pause briefly to pick up the rifle on the ground. I walk across the highway again and up to the Marathon store, just as George emerges with a pair of plastic bags filled with merchandise.
"You find anything?"
he asks. "A few things," I reply, showing him the contents of the box.
"Just food?"
"I didn't see much else," I reply. "How about you?"
"Not a lot. Some water, a little can of almonds, and a box of Band-Aids. Oh, and a travel-sized tube of toothpaste."
"That's not bad,"
"What about the rifle?"
he says, and I hand the weapon to him. He checks it over for a few seconds before ejecting the magazine. He counts the rounds, and then tosses the weapon onto the ground and slips the magazine into his pocket.
"Come on,"
he says.
"Let's get out of here."
I nod and climb up onto Raven, after stowing the items I found in the saddlebags. And we head back out to the highway, heading north.